Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Today we have a battle of the Titans, Tourbillon Titans in rose gold, similar in size and stature, from FP Journe and Lange Sohne. Let the games begin. Versus starts now. We'll begin with the watch from perhaps the better known, or perhaps more celebrated brand at the moment. I'm not sure that Journe is better known than Lange at this point, but Journe watches have been having a moment on the market for about 36 months, and this represents one of the ultimate investment-grade Journe watches. The model here launched in 2013 to celebrate 30 years of FP Journe watchmaking. Technically, this is the FP Journe Tourbillon Anniversaire 30 ans, but everyone calls it the T30. 30 years from 1983 to 2013, from the very first FP Journe pocket watch, his first watch of any kind, to this anniversary model, which was made in a combination of silver and rose gold and built in 99 pieces. The watch is true to the dial design and movement architecture of that first pocket watch. Journe built his Tourbillon pocket watch with chronometer escapement because, in his own words, he could not afford a tourbillon, but he could make one, and so he did. This watch is in some ways a love letter to his heritage and a little bit of a flattery to himself, but also a gift to collectors who would never have an opportunity to own one of those early Journe bespoke pocket watches. The timepiece is easy to wear. It's 40 millimeters and 40 millimeters by 11.3 millimeters thick. You can see lug to lug. It's 48.7 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll zoom out a little bit, get a good sense of this watch. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see what I wear on the watch. It's quite similar in many regards to other 40 millimeter Journe timepieces. Lug to lug, it's almost identical. It's not thick. With a domed bezel, it slides underneath a dress cuff, even though at 11.3 it's a bit thick by Journe standards. Remember, here we have an enormous tourbillon inside plus a hunter case back. I would recommend the watch for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, which means it is a viable unisex option. Now, taking a look at the strap, a little bit unconventional. Journe straps tend to be alligator leather top and bottom. This was a deliberate choice to use calfskin top and bottom. Black calfskin on the bottom, a sort of honey brown on the top, monotone stitch, folded edge, and some bolstering to give it a little bit of volume and thickness. You can see we use pull tab spring bars for easy removal of the strap without tools, and then a curved spring bar so the lugs can be drilled relatively narrow and close together with no impediment to the motion of the strap against the case band. Journe sweating the details. We have a rose gold buckle with a sterling silver pin inside it, and you can see that the case is similar broadly to other Journe dress watches. We have the integration of lugs with case band. We have the definition of the mid case created by the boundary of the bezel and the case back. What's different here is that we have this rose lathe cut in écaille de poisson, or fish scale, on the side of the case, and external guilloche is rare. We tend to see it on dials and sometimes on rotors or movements, but to have a tactile guilloche that you can see and feel, that's quite uncommon, and it sets this watch apart. You can see that the sterling silver, AG 925, it will tarnish over time, and while you can remove the tarnish, it's best to leave the watch to age as Journe intended. He intended it to age like vintage pocket watches tend to do, and as the more affordable anti-corrosive material during the pocket watch era was silver rather than the later stainless steel, this watch includes a nod to the pocket watch era in its construction as well as in its dial. Take note, this is a rare FP Journe case-back tourbillon, as the pocket watch would have been. We also have a dial that echoes that original tourbillon, as we have overlapping hours, minutes, and seconds scales. FP Journe, he invented and made it, and then dial side bolts. That is a signature of Journe wristwatches, so a few nods to the wristwatch era, but mostly this is a rather true silver opaline matte finished reference to that 1983 pocket watch, the first Journe watch of any kind, and wonderfully discreet. You can see the reverse side featuring a sort of grand doge or barleycorn pattern, also cut with a rose lathe, and then of course there's individual numbering for this unit underneath that piece of masking tape. There's also individual numbering underneath this piece of masking tape. The movement, true to the original, it is designed to look like the original pocket watch. The one difference is that the original pocket watch included that chronometer escapement. That doesn't work as well in a wristwatch format, so here we have a standard Swiss lever. Twin barrels, 56-hour power reserve, manual wind, 6-position adjustment, overcoil hairspring, free sprung, and a 21,600 vibration per hour beat rate. The level of finishing is higher than a standard Journe watch. You can see mirrored case interior. The finishing here is outstanding, and it includes unconventional elements such as the black polished caps to the barrel cocks, the frosted finish on all of the gilded bridges and plates, the use of enormous fired blue screws, and these might be the largest blued screws on any movement anywhere. And then of course we have a mirror polished cage, and it is an enormous cage for this 1 minute tourbillon. In terms of architecture, this is as good as it gets. There are two different elements to designing a beautiful movement. One is finish, how you execute the surfacing of the individual parts, and then there's architecture, which is the layout. Is it open? Is it airy? Is it easy to view? Can you appreciate the interplay of forms, spaces, voids, swells, all of the elements that go into making a movement, 3 dimensions and layout? That's architecture. This watch has both. Now, launched in 2011, we have the Lange Sohne Richard Lange Pour le Merite tourbillon. Now there's a lot going on here. The first thing you should know is that the watch is bigger than the Journe. 41.9 millimeters in diameter. It's 12.7 millimeters thick, though it looks thicker, and it's 49.2 millimeters from lug to lug, so it's broader, and it has a large 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Throw the watch on my wrist. Both of them wear well, but the Journe wears better. This is a large watch. It's effectively a 42, and while it's not thick, the sheer sides create the impression of a chunkier watch. Across the wrist, I would say this watch is probably suitable for a wrist no smaller than 15 centimeters circumference, and unlike the Journe, I don't necessarily consider it to be a unisex option. Looking at the hardware and software, we have alligator leather. We have medium rectangular scale in medium brown. We have a monotone stitch, a folded edge, a little bit of bolstering to give it some stuffing and thickness, and then the underside is calfskin. You can see this is a brand new Lange factory strap, just as the Journe features a brand new Journe factory strap. A difference here, the Lange comes with a full deployment clasp, which gives you a little bit more insurance against accidentally dropping your watch. Now, important to note here, this watch, pre-owned, costs about $120,000 to $130,000, but new, it costs $233,400. So the value here is unarguable. The Journe, well, it originally cost a lot less when new, but there are none left new, and pre-owned rates for this between $600,000 and $700,000, and it seems to increase with every auction season. This watch is available for a lot less money, but you mind, this timepiece gives you more, at least in terms of mech and spec. There's a lot more sophistication and complexity here. The dial is made of sterling silver, and it features the triple overlapping Seifert scale. Take note, this is a tourbillon, but with hacking seconds, a rarity among tourbillon regulators. There's also a system that allows the dial to effectively flesh out its scale when you need those hours, and then retract when you do not. It is a regulator dial, which means we have a split between the hours, minutes, and seconds, so you can read them individually. The tourbillon, unlike the Journe, is visible from the dial side, and its layout is designed to echo the tourbillon designs of German watchmaking antiquity. And again, the dial is a disc of sterling silver that is galvanized, the color you see here. The movement L0721 has a lot going on. You can see the bridges have been skeletonized, so you can see the fusee and chain. The fusee and chain, a late Renaissance constant force device, and as you wind, the chain winds from the barrel to the fusee. There's a planetary inside the fusee, so you can wind it without interrupting or altering the torque to the escapement. The idea being, as the barrel winds down and loses its force, it will pull a larger diameter of the fusee, which is an hyperboloid in form, a little bit like a cone, but more sophisticated. So as the barrel runs down, it pulls a larger diameter of the fusee, just like bicycle gears. So even though the mainspring has less force, the fusee will increase the mechanical advantage of the dying barrel and allow constant force to be applied to the escapement for the full 36 hours of power reserve. Manual wind, of course. It is a movement with 31 synthetic rubies, but one real diamond, which is used as the capstone for the underside of the tourbillon. The fusee and chain, fusee alone, just the chain part, 636 parts. The chain is 20 centimeters long, 1/4 of a millimeter wide, and strong enough to vertically suspend 2 kilograms. The tourbillon, as with the Journe, is a free-sprung 1-minute tourbillon with a handmade overcoil hairspring. So it is an excellent timekeeper in any physical position. You can see it has been regulated in 5 positions. And then you can see that there is quite a bit of fine finish here. The beveling is mirrored and gorgeous. The bridges here are made of German silver. They're not coated. The bridges on the Journe are brass, but they're gilded gold here. This golden hue is due to the copper in the German silver material, which is nickel, copper, and zinc. You can see we have both black polished and fired blue screws. It has both. You can see black polished elements, the cap to the pivot or the arbor of the fusee, the ratchet and ratchet wheel atop the barrel itself. We have black polishing of some of the screws as well as the tourbillon carriage components, and then you can see golden chatons are used for some of the pivots as they would have been in the pocket watch era. Those pivot chatons are held in by blued screws. We have 1, 2, 3 different sizes of perlage on the base plate, and then we have hand engraving on the underside bridge to the tourbillon assembly. All of it very, very impressive. This watch has it all from a technical standpoint. And I have to say, from a value standpoint, it is tough to beat. So let's talk about what these two do best and which one does it better overall. So we're going to start with the Journe and its advantages. Obviously, rarity is on your side. Even by the standards of FP Journe watches, this is surpassing. 99 pieces, it sold out immediately, and about a decade after, so it was about 6-7 years after this watch was on the market, Francois Paul himself realized he didn't have one, and he went out on the pre-owned market and he bought one for himself. So that is kind of the ultimate endorsement. But 99 pieces, and even by collectible Journe standards, this is a watch that rarely comes up for sale. So if you want exclusivity, this is the one to buy of these two. A blue chip investment. Again, when you're talking about $700,000 watches, and given the speed at which the value is ramped up, we are talking about an appreciating asset. This is a rare way to get into a modern Journe watch without a whole lot of backlash danger. Like, I can see the CB market deflating. I can't see the market for this deflating to the same extent. I think in the long run, no matter what you pay for this, you probably make money. And I should say it's probably one of the greatest collectible watches of the 2010s because it looks different than Journe's other watches. So many Journe watches appear duplicative of each other. I don't want to compare them to Panerai, but there is a lot of family resemblance. This, on the other hand, is completely original, and it is by FP Journe. A Journe watch, of course, is the product of one man's undiluted vision, whereas as attractive as this is, I'm sure Tony DeHaas just did what he had to do by diktat of corporate boards. Richemont's in it to make money, not leave a legacy. Journe has already left one. The awards, the accolades, the fact that these watches are already collectible in his lifetime, he is probably the greatest living watchmaker on the basis of what he's achieved. Maybe some have the same engineering chops, but they don't have the record of success. This watch is a way of buying into that legacy. I would also say that this is a watch that has more practical power reserve. 56 hours is better than 36. And in terms of movement architecture, you really have to say that the movement architecture of the Journe is more interesting than that of the Lange. This is basically a balance cock with a 3/4 bridge, and then there are cutouts so you can see the parts, and the parts fall wherever the computer laid down the drivetrain when they did the computer-assisted design. Whereas here, you have something that looks as though it were drawn by hand, because back in 1983, it really was. And that is exactly the design that Journe is using for the movement today. It is aesthetically more pleasing. This looks great under a microscope, but this looks great to the naked eye. Now, let's talk about what the Lange does best. This is a watch you can get for about 120 grand, well bought. If this thing were a Richard Mille or a Patek Philippe or a Greubel Forsey, it would cost a lot more. It's also a watch that you can buy used without putting a lot of money in danger. There are a lot of inflated watches on the market today, and while the T30 is not one of them, there are quite a few watches that are probably going to be worth about 20 to 30% less in 18 to 24 months' time. This watch bought at 120 to 130 is money well spent. I would also say lots of mech. If you love movements for movement's sake, it's hard to beat a hacking dial-side tourbillon, this odd but lovable disappearing dial, and the fusee and chain, plus all of the visible apparatus that comes with it. If you love movements for the sake of movements, and finish is your priority over architecture, you're going to pick this. I would also say, realistically, there are a couple of different versions. There was a white gold version, a limited edition platinum version. There was the Handwerkskunst version, so if you don't like the rose gold, you do have some alternatives. There is a similar version of this called the T10, which is platinum. It has a different color scheme, and they only made 10 of them. I've reviewed both watches. I like the T30 better, but really that's the only version of this that doesn't look like the one in my hand, whereas here we have a full 4 different versions, so you have options. Small matter and one easily corrected at the Journe store, but this watch comes with a deployant clasp. The other watch has a pin buckle. Given the value of both watches, I would rather have the deployant to avoid droppage. And I have to say, again, if you're about movement finish, if you're about getting this close and closer, then you're going to buy this watch. At the end of the day, the value disparity makes this comparison difficult. That said, on merits, these watches are highly comparable. Which one you choose is going to come down to your priorities as a collector. Let me know in the description below which one you'd prefer, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go against form and against type. I'm going to pick the mainstreamer. I'm going to pick the Journe. I think it's more beautiful inside and out. I think the legacy of FP Journe, whether you like the guy or not, he's almost like the Mozart of the modern era. And whatever you think of Amadeus, the music is timeless, and so is this watch. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.